You're listening to the Podcast Against Giygas. Episode 5, in which our hero finds out what zombies like to eat. Winters, a cold country at the very top of the island of North Armorica. Here was a quaint little school deep in the woods and snow called the Queen Ethelberga's National Liberal Arts, Mathematics, and Sciences Boarding College of Winters, or Snowwood Boarding House, appropriately enough, for short. The sun, having put up a valiant effort that day to shine through the clouds and gentle snow of the chilly little town, had long receded. 22 o'clock, and it was lights out for the schoolboys, who previously enjoyed a right brilliant romp of a day, which brought them hot tea and cream and rashers and buns with raspberry jam for breakfast, and then either a quiet afternoon in the library to catch up on lessons, or else an immediate return to hostilities following the weekend before's knockdown, drag-out snowball war between the Reds and the Greens, that is, the humanities majors versus the science majors, respectively, all of which were fueled by plenty of hot cocoa on tap. In other words, the boys of Snowwood Boarding House were getting ready to sleep off a perfect Saturday. 5 hours later, one such boy was fast asleep in his dormitory bed, dreaming the things most Winters boys dreamed, like whether alternate events could have transpired to allow science to eventually solve the three-body problem had centuries ago Titus Flavianus lived long enough to enjoy a proper reign over his most hated younger brother. You know, stuff like that. All when a voice interrupted him. "Can you hear me? My name's Paula. I'm a friend you've never met before. If you can hear me, please help us. We're in trouble. Please, find us in Threed. Find us." Jeff woke and sat up in his bed, turning on a lamp nearby, which predictably roused his roommate, Tony. "Jeff, what is it?" "I've just had the most peculiar dream. I'm to join a boy and a girl I don't know on the other side of the world for a grand romp against beastly aliens and right bloody bad guys. I'm to help save the whole entire planet from the very brink of annihilation." Jeff took a moment to scratch his chin, something he always did when a conundrum required his full mental capacities. "Right, I'm busting out of here." He swung his comforter off and sprang out of the bed. At the words busting out, all sleepiness evaporated from his roommate and friend, who leapt out of his own bed with similar gusto. "Wicked! I'll get up the rest of the boyos and nick a key from the prefect." Opening his closet, Jeff chose from an array of 25 identical green Snowwoods blazers, matching green slacks, a pressed white Oxford shirt, an expertly tied black silk butterfly bow tie, and brown leather penny loafers. A world-saving romp, after all, is no reason not to look good. Tony dressed himself in similar attire, while of course remembering to don his favorite wide-brimmed cowboy hat, ever the Eagleland-ophile. The prefect of his dormitory wing was staying awake by spinning his keyring in circles with his index finger, whistling to himself and reading a book, when a loud burst from down the hall startled him right out of his chair. When insolent giggles followed the pop, as lightning inevitably follows a thunderclap, the prefect knew that the ordnance in question was a firecracker, minor fireworks being the latest fad among the green blazers these days. "Oi! Back in your rooms, you lot!" The prefect ran off, so irate at the spot of bother that he discarded his copy of Aeschylus and the keyring alike, which Tony, lurking nearby, was happy to confiscate. Moments later, Jeff and Tony successfully snuck to the front doors of the boarding house, the earlier boyos in question having given the hound dogs plenty of distracting T-bone steaks and long ago acquired the maps, routes, and changing of the guard times of the other night prefects. All that remained was for Jeff to turn the hard-earned key. Blast! It's slightly bent. The defective key was a blow to be sure, but it wasn't the end of the war. The two boys backtracked to their bedroom, and Jeff, whose rucksack was already laden with essentials, only 8 identical pairs of green suits, a necessary paring down for travel purposes, he stuffed the bag with one more item, an invention of sorts with plenty of wires, pistons, blinking lights, and other parts that whirred, buzzed, and beeped. Jeff lugged the thing back to the front doors, with Tony by his side to again facilitate a stealthy and uneventful escape. He put the thing on the door, and for the inordinate noise it made inside the locking mechanism, it anticlimactically ended with a simple click and the door lazily swinging ajar. Jeff beamed to Tony, whose jaw was wide open in awe. "Saving this for a rainy day, I have. I call it the machine that opens most doors, especially when you have a slightly bent key." "Brilliant. You really can invent anything, can't you?" "Well, I like to think so." Still grinning over his success, Jeff made his way to the brick wall surrounding the school, and after Tony gave him a boost up, he jumped just high enough to grab the flat top of the wall, hoist his skinny legs over, and leap down to safety on the other side. Afterwards, Tony threw Jeff's rucksack over the wall and carefully returned him his invention through the iron bars of the front gate. "Say, Jeff, this mission of yours, is it going to be dangerous?" Tony, so elated to help his dear friend only moments ago, was thoroughly deflated once the moment of his long departure finally arrived. "Well, I imagine so. What is any dust-up for the fate of civilization itself, if not high stakes?" Who knew how long he was to be gone? Who knew if he'd even return? And who knew what Tony, who was devoted to his dear friend as no other was, would do if it ever came to that? A twinge of compassion for his roommate twisted in Jeff's heart to make him turn his gaze from the mission just for the moment. "Well, but chin up there, old boy. I'll be sure to write you." "You will?" "Of course. Every weekend I'll have a missive sent expressly to you. That way you'll know I'm tickety-boo." "Brilliant. Well, take care of yourself then." "You as well. I won't soon forget the boost you gave me over the wall." With that, Jeff slipped on his rucksack and ran off into the starry winter's night. If being a born and raised winter's boy hadn't already accustomed Jeff to the harsh cold of this typical mid-June weather, then his standard issue blazer, lined with a slim layer of the warmest material known to man, penguin down, was more than up to the task. Now, to get across the famous Loch Ness, the expansive lake blocking the way to his destination. True, a coastal trek was an option, but it was a long and laborious option at that, and with the urgency of his mission to join his world-saving companions, it was unadvised. Besides, the blazer was warm, but a trip that long beside the water's edge was pushing it. Instead, he reached the coast of this formidable lake and looked for a boat on which he could charter passage. He found none, to his dismay, but found a gaggle of young men in pitched camps, all of whom were known Tessie enthusiasts to a man. Tessie, of course, was the mythical dinosaur said to swim the deep frigid waters of the lake that bore its name to this very day. It would be a real boon to any of those gathered there, who wore green in homage to their chosen major from their nearby alma mater, if they could finally snap a shot of incontrovertible proof of the friendly beast's existence. Jeff, while sympathetic to their cause, had an urgent task at hand, and therefore could not afford small talk with the group which would inevitably snowball into large talk indeed. Instead, he found, if not a seaworthy vessel, then the second best thing, an old salty mariner type, loafing on the shore and smoking out of a pipe. Begging your pardon, kind sir. Suppose I'd like to ford this lake, but lack the proper vessel to do so.
If it's a proper vessel you seek, then there's none save your right, Tessie, Queen of the Sea. When the wind's blowing just right, play the tune on a tin whistle, the one she wants to hear. That's how you be getting up on great Tessie's back. The tune that goes like tu-ra-la-la, tu-ra-la-lee, tu-la, tu-lay.
I see. Is there any chance I could trouble you to play the tune in question? The man obliged him, producing a tin whistle and playing a quaint shanty of a tune as salty as himself and his years' past adventures on the open sea. Very good. Might you be persuaded to barter that very tin whistle? I'll give you 2 bottle rockets for it. Moments later, Jeff stood at the shore's edge, licked the tip of his index finger, and held it aloft. Judging that quality of wind to be just right, he produced the very same tin whistle, and with the aid of his photographic memory played the old tu-ra-la-la, etc., as well as anyone ever did. The wind and waves alike picked up, and an amazing sight appeared before his eyes. The watery, majestic, hulking, purple body and long neck of Tessie herself. She actually bobbed her head to Jeff as if to say, hop on. And Jeff, figuring you couldn't trust anyone if you couldn't trust an old-timer minding his own business anymore, saw no reason not to follow the old man's or Tessie's advice. For as gigantic as the aquatic dinosaur was, the ride was gentle enough. A part of Jeff wanted to alert the hapless Tessie watchers, for, finally, the object of their desire and drive had appeared before him, ready to be admired and photographed. But a few considerations made him decide against it, namely that it seemed if Tessie herself wanted to be spotted, she would have allowed it by now. Not to mention that to so soon and so unsportingly give away the watchers' destination on their grand journey would destroy their whole reason to Etra. Not to really mention, he plumb forgot to bring a set of dinosaur stirrups anyhow. It appeared that Jeff was to go where Tessie willed to go. Thankfully, after an easy trip across the gentle waters that belied the choppy waves along the shore, where Tessie willed ended up on the other side of the lake. Jeff could have sworn he heard the beast whinny as she let him climb down from her back. Then she dipped her head and seemed to smile at the boy, who in turn made a small, awkward bow that suggested something like saying, "M'lady," whilst wearing a brimmed hat to tip. The great Tessie of the lake swam away, and Jeff went his separate way as well. He walked on until he encountered a familiar sight, the Great Stone Thing, a circular formation of huge slabs of rock standing upright, upon which rested more slabs of stone lying flat and creating among them a perfect circle. Winters owed the existence of this monument to the wild peoples who lived on the island of North Armorica in ancient times, the hulking, hairy Cro-Mags. Despite their apparent savagery, it was said that the Cro-Mags had contact with a mysterious alien race who introduced them to civilization and civility alike. And the monument drew some kind of power from the earth for exactly such an extraterrestrial contact. Jeff gave the thing a salute and went on his way to the Andonuts lab, the only house among the quaint Winters homes made entirely out of aluminum. If it already wasn't very difficult to spot the place, a sign above the front door in bright yellow light bulbs bore the name Andonuts Laboratory. Jeff helped himself inside, pounded his feet on the mat, and dusted extra snow off his blazer. Further inside the laboratory, he encountered a familiar sight. An old man, almost the very image of Jeff if his hair and beard weren't silver with age, donning a white lab coat and thick black glasses bearing nearsighted lenses just as powerful as Jeff's, poring over a gigantic gizmo in a wide study area where the only thing more chaotic and Byzantine than the machine system of circuit boards, pistons, wires, and lights were the mess of notes and mathematical formulas on a blackboard behind him and scattered on papers on the floor. It was none other than Dr. Andonuts, esteemed physicist, professor emeritus at Oxbridge University, an upstanding member of the Order of the North Armorican Empire for advances in the service of his country to the concept of space and time itself, or Father for short. Still hard at work on his machine, Dr. Andonuts did not look up to greet his son. Geoffrey? Father? The boy sat himself at a nearby table, upon which rested a platter of small donuts and a pot of hot tea, which the good doctor helped himself to and nibble on during his work. I couldn't help but notice you're absent from school without leave. Have a donut? It couldn't be helped, Father. I'm off to Eagleland to help save the world with some friends of mine. Ah, cheers. Jeff indeed helped himself to a cup of tea and 2 of the small donuts. They appeared to have some sort of sweet red bean filling inside them. Not bad. Friends of yours? I'm sure I've never met them. Well, that's the curious thing. Neither have I. I suppose there's no stopping you then. If you can get the Skyrunner up and running again, she's all yours. Still deep in applying torque to a stubborn gear, Dr. Andonuts, without looking up, thumbed to another machine behind him. This one huge, a near-perfect sphere. But we've already encountered the Skyrunner before, haven't we? Jeff wasted no time, pulling his trusty multi-tool out of his rucksack and getting to work making the Skyrunner ship-shape. After he packed some necessary sundries for the long trip, he switched on a button on the great ship and its engines and systems came to life with a whir. Its cockpit door opened automatically, as if inviting an old friend inside with a wave. Good luck saving the world. And land sakes alive, boy. Be careful. A donut for the road. Jeff waved goodbye to his father, took a complimentary donut, and boarded the Skyrunner. And calculating the time of your SOS at 20 o'clock, or 8 in the PM as you Eaglelanders will have it, and knowing when it's 8 PM in Winters, it's 3 AM in Eagleland, and knowing I had 5 hours to reach you, I set a course for Threed at 8 PM NAT and set the thrusters to speeds that would exploit time zones in a westerly journey, ensuring it was consistently entering each time zone at 7 PM and exiting it at 8 PM all the way up to my destination, where, as you saw, I arrived mere seconds after you called. A rousing success, despite 2 unforeseen snags, one, of course, being the damage the Skyrunner sustained from that landing. Still, though, that's incredible. What was the other snag? I'm jet-lagged like you wouldn't believe. Jeff fell head over heels onto his back onto the dirty 3 dungeon floor, and just like that, he was fast asleep and snoring. 8 hours later, Jeff snapped awake and dusted the dungeon floor dust off his blazer. A good thing he did wake at that time, too, since, though you couldn't tell from looking out the window in that gloomy town, it was technically morning at Threed, which meant whatever monster was keeping them under lock and key was probably very soon fixing to demand its breakfast. Right, now that I've had a bit of a sleep, let's get you lot well and busted out of this mess. I have just the thing. He approached the locked door and produced from his rucksack the very same little invention that successfully unlocked the front doors of the Snowwood boarding house. I call it my machine that opens most doors, especially when you have a slightly bent key. It's performed very well in recent field tests. He placed the doorknob into the machine's slot and turned the thing on. It buzzed and whirred and beeped, and yet the door remained shut. Most, but not all. How dreadfully Aristotelian. Right, stand back. Jeff again went to his rucksack, and this time took out a small set of something he called bottle rockets, though they were unlike anything Ness had ever seen his dad procure after a long drive across the state border for the 4th of July. He threw a single rocket up in the air, and then, taking a small remote control out of his blazer pocket, activated the thing in midair. Using the remote control, Jeff amused himself by steering the small rocket in fun little loop-de-loops before sending it directly to the locked door. The rocket met its target and exploded with a bang. The dust cleared. The door and a good bit of the wall were blown to smithereens, and the way was open. If Jeff's invention made for a poor debut for Ness and Paula, this display of pyrotechnics was enough to impress them both. They made their way out the dungeon, up a long, dark set of stairs, and found themselves outside the mausoleum of a spooky cemetery. The children took cover behind the gloomy building as they could see in the graveyard scores of zombies either climbing out of their caskets to make more mischief, or else ambling back in to tucker down after a good long day of terrorizing the live folk. And now to free the good people of Threed from this ghastly zombie infestation. My plan is this. We play the part of Hannibal, draw the enemy forces out to Canny with an especially tantalizing morsel that they cannot refuse, and then crush our foe with a herd of elephants. Ness and Paula gave Jeff blank stares. What I mean is, we draw them out en masse and spring a trap for the lot of them. First, we give them the one thing they crave most of all. Meanwhile, an especially unruly mob of zombies leapt out of their graves and banded together for some especially mischievous shenanigans. They made their way to the town circus, hoping their trap had sprung even more live human victims to prank, hassle, and eventually feed to their overlord. When all of a sudden, one of them stopped and sniffed the air. Maybe all their other senses were dead on arrival, but not the sense of smell. Soon, others could smell it too. The unmistakable, sweet aroma of... What would that be? Brains? Jeff gave Ness a look of abject horror, as if he had been asked something that, as the popular winter song went, would have made Caligula blush. Brains? God, man! Were you raised in a cave full of video games? Well, I don't know. I was just thinking that... How would you suggest we even procure that... As all things do, even Jeff's revulsion over the prospect of collecting a mass of human brains passed. And so did Ness's embarrassment over even suggesting such a thing. Jeff took in a deep breath and continued. No, Ness, the one thing zombies crave above all else is... Marmite. Marmite? Jeff took out a small plastic jar of the stuff and showed it to the others. It was mostly brown with a yellow and red label. Marmite. A salty yeast spread made from a byproduct of beer fermentation. Some people like it, some don't, but only two kinds of people love it. Zombies and people from Winters. They really like it that much, huh? Oh, we do indeed. We put it on everything. Toast, muffins, scones, currant buns, cucumber sandwiches for tea, and... No, Jeff. The zombies. Oh. Right. Well, yes. In fact, we in Winters think that's why you Eaglelanders are so preoccupied with zombie apocalypses. Your zombie population will be far less ornery if you'd only stack your shelves with some Marmite. Paula, keeping a wary eye on the zombies going in and out of the graveyard, finally joined in on the conversation. Well, let's stay focused. What do we do? Right. We're going to need fans, big ones, and plenty of Marmite. Hundreds of jars, but I can see to that. Just a quick trip back to the Skyrunner, and wait a minute. You packed hundreds of jars of salty yeast spread with you? Well, of course I did. Who knows how long this world-saving romp will last? You don't think I'd jump willy-nilly into that without a steady supply, do you? Meanwhile, it was true. The haunted night air of Threed was swimming with the pleasing scent of Marmite, hundreds of jars up for grabs. Funny enough, the scent came from the exact circus tent to which the zombies were already shambling and moaning on their way. They picked up their undead pace to a kind of horse gallop, licking their sputum-stained lips. They arrived at the tent and could not believe their great luck. It was indeed a stockpile of Marmite, jars and jars of the precious stuff arranged in a grand pyramid. The jars themselves opened and a bunch of fans wafting the sweet smell into their rotten nostrils. Arms outstretched, they shambled to the treasure trove of their favorite salty yeast spread. Okay, fans, yeasty stuff, then what? Well, then we do what anyone does when they have to deal with vermin. We put down some paper. One of the zombies took a step, and found to their surprise, their foot did not come back up from the floor. Taking another step, that foot stuck in place to the floor just as good. Soon enough, the tent was filled with the moans and screams of scores of the undead, stuck to huge slabs of paper with some kind of glue. Their feet fastened to the floor, toppling down and sticking to the rest of their rotten bodies, their stuck arms and legs flailing around like a fly in a puddle or a mouse in a trap. Some of them, the more desperate among the unfortunate trapped undead, even still tried to grasp in vain for the large pyramid of open marmite. Zombie paper? Yes, zombie paper, sticky paper that catches zombies. Do I have to spell everything out for you lot, or have you any imagination at all? The children set their trap, and the zombies indeed fell for it, hook, line, and paper. They waited a long while to make sure all of them had wandered into the deadly tent, the same site where only a night before the zombies themselves ensnared unwitting children. Once confident there wasn't a single undead soul harassing the town of 3, did the children dare to venture inside. Surveying the smashing results of Jeff's expert plan, hearing scores of zombies moaning in even more agony than their mere cursed existence already gave them cause to moan, as the children's alive feet tread upon the zombie paper without getting stuck.
No, we're going to die. Again. You're the enemies of zombie kind, you monsters.
Oh, don't be so melodramatic, you lot. You'll only be stuck for a couple days, plenty of time to think about what you've done, and it serves you right. The threat finally seen to, the children regrouped outside the cursed and now quite noisy circus tent. Now the good people of 3 are safe, and if the zombies improve their manners, we can leave the marmite as a token of good faith. As much as I'd hate to part with it. But we're not done yet. They are never just zombies, you see. It will do us no good to defeat only Varro and leave behind the legions of Paulus. We have to find the source of the outbreak and destroy it. As if on cue, a horrible moaning emerged from a nearby manhole. Whatever the thing was, it finished its utterance with a disgusting belch. My guess, we'll find it down there. Against Ness's protestations, and especially Paula's protestations, Jeff convinced the other 2 that the way forward was down. The 3 of them eventually lifted the solid iron covering off from the road and descended. Reaching the bottom, Ness and Paula held in deep breaths and hugged the walls where the walkways were safely away from the filth flowing like a shallow river beside them. Jeff, however, suddenly stopped with a puzzled look, actually sniffed the air, and then, to Ness and Paula's abject horror, actually kneeled down in front of the sewer chute, dipped a finger, and tasted its contents on the tip of his tongue. Ah! Jeff, gross! Don't be alarmed. I assure you it's not as ghastly as all that. See for yourselves. Their curiosity piqued, Ness and Paula took a closer look. It actually did look sort of different, darker, more liquid than solid, and with a frothy white head on the surface. Once they dared to take a normal breath, as Jeff was already doing, they did have to admit it smelled nothing like the worst-case scenario either. To Ness, it almost smelled like beer? Well, stout, technically, but yes. And you know what that means. Somewhere down here is a veritable Marmite factory. Well, I'm sure I've never heard of a brewery throwing out the brew for the barley, but there you are. Yes, my friends, I'm afraid the zombie infestation is much, much deeper than we thought. And deeper the children went through the sewer, a long, dark aqueduct of beer. Ness thinking all the while that, while thankful it didn't smell as bad as it really should have, he'd rather be anywhere else. Of all the things that could have possibly happened in a dark sewer full of zombies, they reached a fork in the road. Jeff stopped, paced around the dry spot of walkway, frowning, tapping and scratching his chin, the way he always did when an especially vexing problem came along. Oh dear, it'll be a gamble no matter which way we... Another horrible, loud scream, punctuated by another revolting belch, barreled through the left-hand walkway, which, while it would have all but made Ness turn tail and run screaming, suddenly cheered up Jeff. Ah, this way! The children ventured on. Whereas before the only sounds they could hear were the gurgling rush of discarded beer and the drips of moisture from the walls and their own nervous breaths, the deeper in they went, they began to hear the typical sounds of industry, engines whirring, assembly lines wheeling, and overseers cracking their whips. They reached what looked like the beating heart of a huge factory, where amid the complicated machinery, they could indeed see hundreds of small jars of Marmite pulling along on conveyor belts. But that was not the notable thing they saw in this expansive factory. No, that would have been what was undeniably the source of all the shouts and burps they had heard the past hour. There it was, a repulsive pile of garbage, puke, and rotten detritus, a stinking estuary of decay and vomit that no doubt was the source of the zombie infestation in Threed. The thing actually had bulging, bloodshot eyes and a huge mouth with sharp jaws, but thankfully those eyes and sharp jaws were trained behind itself, gorging on a vat of pure, refined Marmite. From their hiding place, Jeff whispered to the others a plan. Right then. The thing is hopelessly distracted on its own supply of contraband. I say we make like Vespasian and bring up the North African legions long before Vitellius ever becomes the wiser. Okay, that sounds good. What does that mean? Simple, old boy. We perform a little subterfuge and then strike while we have the element of surprise. Okay, sounds good, but how do we perform the subterfuge? And what does subterfuge mean? Leave that all to me. Just follow my lead. Jeff tiptoed out from behind the wall, cleared his throat, and spoke in his best attempt at a zombie's raspy, undead voice.
Oh, Master, we've returned.
You brought food. You brought human children.
Thankfully, his best attempt appeared to be good enough. Jeff sighed in relief, then tiptoed closer to the monster, quietly taking out a laser pistol of his own design with his right hand, and the rocket remote control in his left. He motioned to the others to join him, and they nervously approached beside him and took out their own weapons.
Yes, Master, we brought the children.
Boy and girl that could beat Giygas. Boy and girl now become vomit in my guts.
Yes, Master, that's generally how the digestive process works.
Ness cringed and whispered to Jeff.
What are you doing? That's not what zombies say. Oh, well, why don't you try it then, since you're the bloody zombie expert?
Ha 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 ha. Stupid little children thought they could beat Giygas. Walk right into trap.
That's right, Master. There's nothing they love more than a circus full of that is, a circus.
Stupid little... Wait. Why you talk funny?
Talk funny, do I? I'm from Winters, you big fat oaf. Jeff! If there was one thing Jeffrey Andonuts could not stand for, it was any and all slights, real and perceived, against his home, country, and culture. It was enough to make him stamp his foot and entirely abandon the element of surprise. The thing turned around in a rage and trained its horrible bloodshot eyes on the three living kids. It gnashed its puke-stained teeth and licked its lips as it slithered toward the children. Ness and Paula, dragged hopelessly in the middle of Jeff's now aborted plan to get the drop on the monster, had no choice but to defend themselves. As the vomit amoeba propelled itself closer and closer, snapping its jaws and swinging slimy limbs like a gigantic putrid octopus, Paula telepathically swung her skillet while strategically setting other parts of the slime pile on fire. Jeff also laid down supporting fire with his laser pistol and launched rockets with aplomb. Unlike the other kids, however, Ness was not yet a fighter. He had barely gotten into a handful of scuffles at school or the occasional fracas with Porky years ago. He tiptoed toward the thing, then jumped back at the first sign of danger, his bat shaking in his hands. The monster sensed his unease, and thinking him easy picking, snatched Ness by the ankle with a slimy tentacle. It raised the terrified boy into the air and dangled him over its jaws, snapping open and shut, open and shut. Ness flailed around and screamed as much as his lungs could bear, swinging at nothing with his bat while he dangled upside down by the ankle. Thinking fast, Jeff put away his gadgets and took something else out of his pocket. "You there! Vomit beast!" He unscrewed the small jar of Marmite in his hand and threw it at the slimy thing. It emptied and spilled all over the monster's face. "Some people like it, some hate it. Let's see which one you are." The monster laughed, belched the most repulsive burp yet, and threw Ness off to the side. The other kids stood at the ready as the thing slithered closer.
The apples say 3 boys, 1 girl beat him. Makes me laugh. Ha! Giygas not afraid of you.
As if just noticing it, the monster slurped a morsel of Marmite from the jar Jeff threw and continued his advance.
If someone beat Giygas, they have to be...
Again, regarding an especially tantalizing dollop of Marmite still dripping off him, this time the monster took a full-toothed chomp of itself.
They have to be worse than the greatest evil of all. You...
The monster took another bite of its vomit self, then another. It slurped and sucked and munched and gnashed, but no matter what, it could not get enough of the sweet Marmite spilled all over its body. Jeff stood at ease and watched his foe with a triumphant smile. It was a fait accompli. Enough time then passed where Ness was able to dust himself off from the fall and regroup, and for even Jeff's initial smug satisfaction to turn into abject horror at the sight of the monster devouring itself. Allow me to put it out of its misery. Jeff took out a whole handful of rockets and launched them with the remote control into the gruesome, belching pile of vomit. The rockets met their targets and exploded. A few seconds later, the smoke cleared. There was puke everywhere, and there was also a great big hole in the wall where the monster used to be. It was over. The danger finally averted, Ness took the opportunity to be appropriately shell-shocked by his first real fight against evil. Paula noticed Ness breathing heavily and looking intensely at the very spot where only moments ago he was hanging by a throw-up tentacle over the quite literal jaws of certain death. She went to his side and put a comforting arm around his shoulder. I almost died. I was so close. It's okay, Ness. We beat it. Yeah, no thanks to me. Right, rather thanks to my Marmite. A marvel of Winter's ingenuity and engineering, eh? Jeff playfully elbowed Ness in the other shoulder with a laugh, but it didn't seem to cheer him up much. Chin up, old boy. You know what they say. A fight you walk away from is a win in itself. A Pyrrhic victory is a victory all the same. Ness took in a deep breath and nodded to the others. Okay, I'll be all right. Thanks, guys. I say, have a look at this. The kids then drew their attention first to the big hole in the wall that Jeff blew up with his rockets, then the weird and wonderful Technicolor world they saw on the other side, and finally the strange, short, stout little creatures that were marching in a line toward that hole in the wall and into that weird and wonderful Technicolor world. The creatures, who resembled pink little balls of fur, perhaps the size of a basketball, with a stout little whiskered nose, cute little face, with an even cuter little red bow tie on their single blonde locks of hair, and 2 little feet to waddle wherever they might go, sang a fun little oompa oompa march in a bizarre language as they entered the world beyond the sewer. The children looked on for a long while, and the more they looked, the less it made sense, until one of the roly-poly creatures noticed them, and with a nod of its head seemed to beckon them to follow. Shrugging to each other, happy to leave the dreary sewer factory as much as they were curious to see the wonderful world themselves, they joined the creatures through the hole in the wall, and into the dreamland lying in welcome before them. You've been listening to the Podcast Against Giygas. The Podcast Against Giygas is an audiobook written and performed by me, Garrett McMahon, based on Earthbound, the Super Nintendo game directed by Shigesato Itoi, with production by William Pulowski and thumbnail design and art direction by David Peters. This podcast stinks. It is also a fan-made project affiliated in no way whatsoever with the Nintendo Corporation or Mr. Itoi. This podcast is free to listen to, ad-free, and always will be. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and I'll see you back next Monday. Till next time.